Hello class, this video is about chapter 8 in our textbook. We're going to be looking at control structures. By control structures we mean if-else blocks, switch construct, also loops, while loops, do-while loops, and for loops. Starting off though, we're going to look at some operators, the identity and equality operators. This is how chapter 8 starts off. And you'll notice here I've declared an integer, a double. A number with decimal places is a double by default, and a string because I've quoted my number 10 here. Okay, and then we're going to report by using the getType method. We're actually going to report the type of each one of those variables. And then I want to try using the equality operator. Double equal sign is a test for equality. And I'm also using the conditional operator, which you can read about on pages 244 and 245, and we actually have a separate example for it. But it's a wonderful way to use an alternative structure for if and else blocks. Basically, the way it works is you have an expression here, which evaluates as either true or false. And then following a question mark, you have what you want to happen if it's true, if this condition back here were true. And then following a colon, what you want to have happen if it's false. And let's give this one a run. I can run it right here in my NetBeans by right-clicking on it and running it. There's the output that we get from this one. And if we just move it down here, I think we can see almost all of it here. Yeah, so we got num1 is an integer, num2 is a double, num3 is a string, as you can see from the first part of the program. And then we're going to use echo statements with the conditional operator 4 different times. And you'll notice that 10 is equal to 10.0. We got a yes equal on that. But if we use the identical operator, it's not the same. They have to be equal and identical for this operator to be true. And we didn't get that. Likewise, we can also use num1 with num3. That would be the integer comparing it to the string value. Well, that string is actually converted into a numeric type. And so they are, in fact, equal if you use the equality operator, double equal sign, but they are not equal and identical, and so we do not get that result for true. So just to explain this last line here, just to make sure you're okay with it. The reason that we got no, not equal and identical was because this evaluates as false. They're not equal and identical because one is an int and one is a string. So we don't get this true block executing. Instead, we get this false block executing. That's the conditional operator. It's a great short form for if and else. Okay, moving from there, I'd like to take a look at the logical operators. Your logical operators, you can read about them, by the way, in php.net, the manual for PHP. And what I'm going to do is we're going to set a value for a variable age, but we're going to do that with the query string. As you can see, I'm using the $_get super global. Now, you should never really do this in practice. And by the way, all of these examples are not using secure code, but we want to just quickly show you some concepts about controls in this video. So we're going to get a value for age. Now, we're going to use the logical AND operator. There's the logical AND operator, double ampersand. By the way, it's the same in some other programming languages. So what we've got here is a condition that's going to find a teenager. If age is greater than or equal to 13 and age is less than 20, then we've got a teenager, else we've got not a teenager. And then we'll do the same thing down here, but show you that you can also use AND as your AND operator. And by the way, you could use OR for your OR operator. And there's one that the book leaves out, which is the exclusive OR. Exclusive OR means one or the other, but not both. Whereas OR doesn't care if they're both true. But exclusive OR, not both can be true. Now dead for a long time comedian Groucho Marx had a TV show in the early days of television, and he used to ask his guests, "Are you married or happy?" And of course, that's a a joke, a Groucho joke. Well, I've set to $married and $happy to be both true with a value of 1. 1 equates to true. And I'm using the XOR operator here. Well, they can't both be true if you use XOR, and so we're going to get this output here. So we'll give this one a run. This is our identity. I'm sorry, this is our logical example here. So we'll right-click on that and run it. And it crashes, but it's only crashing because I haven't given it the age variable a value. So we don't even need a form. We can just try age equals 12 here up in the query string. And when I do age equals 12, because not a teenager from the first one, not a teenager for the second one. And I do get, Groucho said you can't be both because the else block executes down here because they can't both be true in XOR. Okay, moving on. Next one I'd like to look at, we have an HTML file here which is going to ask you to enter a percentage test score, and that is going to run a script called ifelse1.php. Well, let's give that a run for starters. So when we run that, we get a very crude looking form. I'm going to enter a test score of 97 and hit submit, and that gives us an A grade. Now let's see why we got that. By the way, I'll just take that back and try some other scores. Let's say we had 66. That would be a D grade. 77 would be a C grade, and so on. That's the normal grading structure we use here at the college. So let's take a look at this if-else1 PHP, because this is going to show you how to use if and else if when you have more than two conditions. Sometimes in a program you'll just need an if block, and if that's not true, an else block. But in some cases there's more than one decision that has to be evaluated, and that would be the case for grading a percent score. So whenever you get something like that, you should always do it in a sequence. Notice I'm starting with greater than 89, that would be an A. Mark greater than 79, that would be a B, and so on. Notice how we're descending 89, 79, 69, 59. That's what you want to do. It's not necessary to make, for example, for a B grade, you don't have to say mark greater than 79 and less than 90. It's not necessary because I couldn't get to this point in the program unless it were less than 89, or less than or equal to 89. So let's give this one a quick run here. Well, actually, I guess we did when we ran the grading program. Okay, let's try the next one then. Next thing I'd like to look at is that ternary operator. Here's that ternary or conditional operator, as it's sometimes called. We're assigning 1 to a variable called num, and we've got a loop while num is less than 10, and we're going to use the conditional operator right here. Now I put the expression that's going to be evaluated as true or false inside parentheses in this one. Don't really need to do that. It would work fine without the parentheses. And so as you can see, what we're doing here is we're going to use the modulus operator, divide it by 2, and see if the result is 0. Well, that would be a test for an even number. So if that is true, then test will be assigned the value even. If, however, this condition is false, test will get the value odd. And then we'll output the variable and the value of test. And plus plus num will prevent this from being an endless loop. So this will continue to cycle. Now, a good usage of the conditional operator is to control plurality in your output. If a user has purchased only one item, for example, on a PHP commercial website, you don't want to say you bought 1 items. You just want to say 1 item. However, you also don't want to say you bought 4 items. You would want to say you bought 4 items. So you can handle that very nicely with the conditional operator. If $items equals 1, assign items or echo items, item, if not, echo items with the S on it. So let's see what happens when we give this one a run. This is the ternary operator here, so I'll just right-click on it and run it. It'll run it in my Apache XAMPP. And as you can see, it does evaluate the odd and even numbers properly. And it stops at 9 because the condition was continue while $num is less than 10. And because we have items equal to 1, we get one item. I'll just try a different value here. Just quickly modify that, and I'll update this with a... actually, I have to do a Control F5 to really make sure that that updates. Oh, I've got to save the document here. I'll save it with that change, and then notice we get 4 items, which is grammatically correct now. So that's good usage of that operator. All right, the next one I'd like to look at is a switch. Another type of control structure is a switch, and this is also good if you have multiple values that you want to check. In other words, you need more than just an if block and an else block. And we've got a little example here that's going to list some universities, and what we'll do is they're going to show up as a drop list, and we're going to use Redux on this one. This one uses what's called Redux because I've got up here, take a look at this, if empty $_post submitted. Well, submitted is the attribute name for a hidden variable type here with the value of dummy. So if the form is submitted, it should run the code down here. However, if this is empty, if the form has not been submitted, well, let's show the form. So what we can do here is we can show the form and process the form with one file, and that's what Redux is in PHP. Now you'll notice what we're doing for the action is we're actually using $_server PHP self, which is a constant that's in the $_server super global array, and we're being careful to be secure by using HTML special chars here. So this is what you can do if you want a file to run itself after you submit it. When you submit the form, you want to run the same file. And so you can both display the form and process the form in one file. Let's see how this one works here. So this is switch, and let's give it a try. There's the drop list. So let's say I choose Florida. Florida teams rock. I'll try choosing Auburn. And we get that output. So let's take a look at the code of the switch. We're switching on the value of team, which is the name of our select tag up here. That's the attribute for our select tag. So when we make a selection, $_post, once again, I'm not sanitizing this in any way, so I'm being fast and loose here. We're just trying to cover the concept of a switch. So we switch on the value of team with a number of cases. Now, I wanted to respond the same way to the Florida universities, and so I stacked them up like this. We can stack up these cases for the Florida universities and generate the same output for all of them. Now, you always have to have a break at the end of each case, otherwise the code will fall through to the next case. Okay. Now, a default case is also a good idea. In this particular case, it's optional. It's always optional. I really didn't need it in this case, but I just wanted to show you that you can have a default case if none of these cases are true. In this particular case, because the select option tags had only choices, these choices, no other value could have been assigned to the variable, so I really don't need that default. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Oh, and this is just more about Redux. Here's another way you can do that Redux concept, which means you can have one file both display a form and also show what happens when you submit the form. And I've done it just a little bit differently on this one. I've used if empty $_post input, and once again we're going to run by using PHP self. We're going to run the same file when we submit the form. So if this is empty, we're going to show the form. If, however, it has a value in it, that means it's been submitted, then we'll show this code here. So when we run this one, let's take a look at it. I just thought you might want to see this. This is not in our book, but I thought you might want to see it. Okay, 12. And just parrots back whatever I entered. Once again, I'm not sanitizing this in any way, so you'd never want to do this in a real application exactly like this. But I wanted you to see the syntax of a Redux. Okay, next one. Another Redux with an if in it. Now, here's something that you can do with your if and else blocks, which can save you some coding. Instead of having to echo a whole lot of code out, what you can do is specify your if expression and then finish with a colon. Special syntax, colon required here. And then you can have just nothing but HTML here, no echo statements. Follow that with just else in a colon. And then this code here is the else block. Right here is the else block. And then finally, you finish this all off with an end if, with a semicolon, not a colon. That's like the finishing statement, if you like. It's the semicolon that finishes the entire construct. So let's give this one a run. It's called Redux if. And we'll try 7. So it doesn't do much, but it just shows you that it's an alternative way of coding your PHP. If you want to, you can do it. Next one I want to take a look at was using the loops. Let's take a look at the while loop. The first type of loop we want to take a look at is the while loop. And while loop uses the syntax keyword while, and inside parentheses you have an expression which is going to evaluate as either true or false. If that condition is true, the code inside the loop will execute. Now, one thing about a while loop is it's a pre-test loop. And so in order to have something to test, you have to have a variable that is going to be evaluated, declared, and given a value before you start your while loop. So I've assigned 1 to the variable count here. And we're going to print out count and the square of count. And then we're going to increment count. Now, if I leave this out, I've got an endless loop or infinite loop, which is usually a programming error. Let's take a look at that one. It's called while. Just give it a run here. And that's all it does. It just prints out the squares from 1 to 9. Working with loops is a lot of fun because you can get so much output with just a little bit of code. Okay, now we got another one called while 2. This one, a little bit different syntax. We're going to use that colon syntax that we used with the if and else block earlier, but we'll do it this time with while and end while. I've got a variable count up here, initialized with a value of 0, nothing else in that little block of PHP. And then here's the while loop, the while condition, and instead of opening a curly brace, semicolon, then I can follow that with as much HTML as I want. I have to finish the entire while loop with the end while, keyword end while, and that has a semicolon. So that's another alternative that you can use. Let's see what that one looks like. Gives us the same output as the other program. Okay. There's another one. This is do loops. Another type of loop is a do loop, and the do loop, also called the do while loop, differs from the while loop because the condition is at the end of the loop after the closing brace. And by the way, it always finishes with a semicolon like this. So this is what we call a post-test loop, because the loop condition to continue the loop is not evaluated until the loop has finished executing at least once. A do-while loop will always run at least once. And in this case, this is going to output some squares again. So let's just see what this one does if we give it a run. And get the same output again. Now here's something interesting though. If I put 12 here, well, notice the condition is to continual count is less than 10. But because this is a do while loop, the code block always executes at least once. So if I save that and come back and refresh this page here, you'll notice I get only the 12 squared equals 144, and then this condition is false and that stops the loop, so we only get one piece of output. So a do while loop always runs at least once. Next one we want to take a look at is a for loop. For loops, generally you use for loops when you know specifically how many times you want a loop to cycle. If you want a loop to cycle 10 times, $i equals 0, $i less than 10, $i plus plus will do that. This is going to cycle 10 times. Let's see what we get for output here. I'm outputting $i with a space after it, so all of this should output on one line. Let's see if that is the case. Here it is here. Yeah, we get from 0 to 9 all in one line. Notice we don't get the 10 because we want to continue this loop while $i is less than 10. Once this loop finishes, by the way, $i does have a value of 10. If I were to print out $i after this loop, I would get 10. So that's your basic for loop. You've got three parts to it separated by semicolons. You've got your initialization of what we call the loop control variable. Then you've got the condition that's going to stop the loop, and then you have a modifier to modify the value of your loop control variable. It doesn't always have to be incremented by 1. And by the way, for loops can go down as well. This is obviously going up from 0 to 9, but we could also go backwards if we start with this number being larger, use some sort of expression here with a greater than symbol, and use minus minus here instead of plus plus. We can have a loop go backwards. Let's look at the next one here. We've got one called for loop 3. And this one is going to use that colon syntax here. And what we're going to do is we're going to write a, we're going to use a for loop to write a control, which is a very nifty usage of a for loop inside of a HTML or PHP page. And notice I'm going to use for and end for. Just as we had end while to finish a while loop, there's an end for keyword that'll finish a for loop. And what we're going to do is use this to print out. You notice we have a select tag up here with the name pick. And what we're going to do is we're going to display a number of options in that drop list, but we're going to execute a file called loopcell PHP when the choice is made. So we'll have to look at that too. Let's start by running for loop 3. So all of these choices here were generated by that loop, which is a very cool usage of a loop inside of your PHP. So I'll choose, say, this one, and submit. Now you can see I'm in the loopcell PHP file, and I've got the choice 8. If we take a look at the loopcell program, here it is, and you can see basically it's not doing anything except telling us what we selected. Very simple file. Okay, so I think we've covered everything here. These examples are on your page inside my courses. Try them, mess around with them, try changing them a little bit. And if you want to use Redux in anything you submit in this course, that's okay with me. Hope that helps.